The day my father's flag rubbed splinters into my palm, something in me settled that had been restless for years. He'd carved the pole himself and planted it near our porch back when I was a kid. After he passed, I kept it in my workshop, waiting for the right home to fly it again. That morning, with the cicadas starting up and coffee steaming in a chipped mug, I raised his flag on the front porch of the little white house I'd just bought, the one next door to our place. The one that sat outside the HOA line like an island in a storm. The wind caught the cloth, red and white bending and snapping, and the blue washed everything clean. That's when Karen screeched to a stop at the curb. I knew about her before I met her. Everyone did. She was the HOA president across the property line. A woman who walked the neighborhood like a warden, clipboard always tucked under her arm. She and her crew measured grass with rulers. They sent violation notices for wind chimes. Once they fined a guy for parking his veteran son's truck facing the wrong way on the street. "Rules are rules," she would say, smiling the way a cat smiles at a bird. She stepped out of her SUV, an ironed white capris, and a visor, squinting hard at my flag like it owed her money. "You can't live here," she called. Words shot across the lawn like buckshot. I set the halyard and looked at her over the porch railing. "Morning to you, too." "Can't live here," she repeated louder, like the volume would make it true. "This address is within Rolling Ridge Estates and subject to the covenants. Rental exterior colors must be HOA approved and flags are limited to not in your HOA," I said, calm as a pond. "Not even a little." She looked left and right, as if the air might back her up. "I know every parcel in this subdivision, and you know this isn't one of them." I reached inside and grabbed the manila folder I'd been carrying everywhere since closing day. I kept the deed on top like a lucky photograph. House was built in 1958, when Rolling Ridge platted in 84. The developer didn't manage to get this strip of land title dispute back then. Long story. County map still shows it as an unassociated lot. It lines up with my ranch parcels to the west. Outside your gates, outside your meetings, outside your rulers. Karen took a few steps up my walk, slow like I might be bluffing. She did that smile thing, tight. Smug, then pointed her pen at the fresh white siding I'd started painting last weekend with my niece. "We'll see about that." "We will." 10 minutes after she left, my neighbor Carl shuffled over with his retired diesel smell and a grin. "You just made her morning cardio count," he said, hitching his pants. "She usually saves that pace for garage sales Saturdays." Carl told me the neighborhood stories while we shared the porch. He'd been a lineman for 30 years and remembered when the county paved our road for the first time. He remembered my dad's old Ford, the angry blue one that hauled fence posts and Little League teams. "Karen moved in 8 years ago and declared herself queen by Christmas," he said. "Folks were tired. Nobody pushed back. I told him I wasn't moving here to pick fights. My wife, Sarah, had been wanting a smaller place in town, closer to her mom's doctor and the kids' school. My ranch was only 15 minutes away, but winter made those minutes longer. When this old white cottage went up for sale, it felt like the answer to a prayer we hadn't asked out loud. It had a deep porch, a hickory tree out back, and a workshop where my boy could learn 2 plain wood shavings into curls that smelled like sugar. The lot being outside the HOA, that was just an extra blessing. By lunch, a welcome committee formed on my sidewalk. 2 women I didn't know. One wore a name tag sticker like she was at a conference. Pencil skirts, identical clipboards, identical practice smiles. "We're here to provide your starter packet," taller one said. "I don't need one," I answered, holding the screen door with a hip while I wiped my hands. The kitchen smelled like bacon first. Meal cooked in the new place and coffee had left a ring on the counter I knew my mother would have scolded me for. "This property isn't in Rolling Ridge." They exchanged glances. "All adjacent parcels are considered within our sphere," the shorter one said. "Sphere isn't a legal term," I replied. "You can't ticket gravity." The taller one slid a paper through the door anyway. "Here are the rules and regulations. You have 10 days to submit your paint colors for approval and remove any non-conforming flags." My father's flag isn't up for committee vote. They left with tight lips, and I set their packet under a wobbly table leg to stop the shimmy. That night, Sat on the back steps with Sarah and watched the lightning bugs pull their slow magic tricks over the yard. Our daughter Leela tried to catch one in a jelly jar. Our son Evan ran the hickory tree like it owed him a branch. The house smelled like sawdust and laundry soap and a little like bacon still. For the first time in a long time, my shoulders dropped. After everything with the ranch, after the years of fixing fences and chasing storms and making up bills, this quiet patch of town felt like a gift. It lasted until 6:15 the next morning. A white SUV idled at my curb. Hazard lights winked like a dare. A man in a polo with compliance officers stitched above his heart stood in my flower bed with a tape measure. He waved at the camera I'd mounted above the garage, then started measuring the height of my flagpole. "Can I help you?" I said, stepping onto the porch in boots without socks. Coffee in one hand. "You have exceeded the maximum pole height," he said, not looking up. "Also, your porch swing is an unapproved addition. Your mailbox is non-conforming, and your truck cannot be parked in the driveway overnight." "You're on private property," I replied. "Not yours." He noted something on his clipboard. "The HOA president has filed an emergency enforcement action. Can file it in a bird bath," I said. "This land's outside your map." He smirked as if he'd heard that before and knew I'd eventually fold. But he hadn't met my father. He hadn't sat at our kitchen table and listened to a man with grease under his nails explain that a deed is a promise, and a promise is a line you don't cross. He hadn't watched my mother iron church dresses by a swamp cooler. Humming a hymn about standing firm, Sarah came to stand beside me, her robe folded tight against the chill. I felt the heat rise in my chest, the kind you ride like a careful horse, not the kind that bucks you into saying things you regret. "Here's what's going to happen," I told him. "You're going to step off my property. Then you're going to stop trespassing. Then, if you still feel jumpy, you can talk to the county recorder's office and ask them to show you the plat map. They'll circle this lot in red, and they'll tell you it's outside your reach. If you want to argue, bring a lawyer. I've got a folder ready." He backed off the flower bed slowly, eyes on my camera. "We prefer to resolve matters neighbor to neighbor," he said. "So do I told him. But I'm not the one ignoring the map." He got in his SUV, tapped something into a tablet, and rolled away. The flag snapped softly overhead. The coffee tasted a little bitter, but I finished it anyway, because my father taught me you don't waste what you worked for. At 8 a.m., Karen posted a notice on her community Facebook page. I only saw a screenshot later. "New resident non-compliant," she wrote. "Spreading misinformation about boundaries. Be vigilant." By noon, a rumor had grown arms that I planned to open a mechanic shop in my driveway, that I'd paint the house neon, that I had a pack of wild dogs. I laughed until I didn't, because at 3:20 a deputy sheriff pulled up. The siren only chirped once. He stepped out carefully, hat in hand. Calm face, easy smile. "Afternoon," he said. "We got a call about a disturbance." I looked past him toward Corin Street. Half a dozen faces watched behind curtains. "You're here for my flag?" I asked. "Flag, truck, mailbox, possibly a generator," he said, checking his pad. "Mind if I come up?" "Sure," I said, and held the door. The house smelled like fresh paint, and Evan's Lego fort took up a whole corner of the living room like a castle made of stubborn. I set the deed folder on the kitchen table and slid it across. The deputy flipped through, nodding. "We get these flare-ups every so often," he said after a minute. "Some folks think the HOA is the law, but we've got maps older than their bylaws." He took a slow lap around the porch, checked the street, and then radioed something simple. "No violation," he said. "Property outside HOA. Civil matter." I watched through the screen as Karen's visor dipped across the road. It must have stung, hearing the county say the word outside. But I knew her type. She wouldn't let it in there. People who collect power like seashells can't stand to hear it crash. When the deputy left, I sat again with the flag shadow on my lap and thought of my dad. I could hear his voice plain as day. "Son, land is more than dirt. It's the story of your people. You guard it like you'd guard your name." I ran my thumb over the deed's raised seal and felt a steadiness settle in my jaw. That was the night I dug. out the old survey stakes from my ranch shop and loaded them in the truck. If they wanted a line, I'd show them a line they couldn't erase. And if they wanted a fight, I'd give them a lesson in quiet justice. 2 days later, the morning came up pale and gold across the hickory tree, and I was already outside with a string line and a bucket of bright orange stakes. Carl tottered over with his thermos, squinting like he didn't trust the daylight. "Making art?" he asked. "Drawing a map the old-fashioned way," I said. "The county's got the official plat. I've got something stronger." I tapped my chest. Memory. When I was 12, my father dragged me across a winter pasture to teach me 2 things: how to respect the way the land lays, and how to read a deed so no man could take advantage of you. We found the iron rods under frozen grass, lined them in our heads with fence corners and creek bends. He said a line isn't just points in space. It's agreement. It's handshake and witness, and the way your word holds shape. I put his lesson into the dirt that day. Staking the legal boundary every 15 feet, not for me. But for the people who would pretend they couldn't see it, Karen saw the first stake go in, and stormed across the shared easement like a siren in sneakers. "What do you think you're doing? Showing you where your rules stop." I kept my voice even. The string line stretched tight and straight as a hymn. "If anyone steps over these for enforcement again, I'll treat it as trespass." "I don't want to, but I will." She planted her hands on her hips. I saw the visor shake. "You're creating a nuisance." "Boundaries calm neighborhoods," I said. "Confusion creates nuisance." "This street is governed by Rolling Ridge," she insisted, even as the string pointed at the truth. "We maintain it. We secure it. You maintain your side," I said. "You secure your gates. You don't govern my porch?" Behind her, 2 men from her board hovered like board bouncers. One was the compliance officer with the tape measure. He took pictures with his phone, zooming in on my stakes like they were contraband. The other held a thin folder I recognized, their covenants. They carried those bylaws like a Bible, but they read them like a menu, picking only what they wanted. A white Camry pulled up, and a woman got out mid-50s. City badge clipped to her blouse. She nodded at me, then at Karen. "I'm Rachel from the county planning office," she said, voice brisk but kind. "We got emails?" "Perfect," I said. "I brought my paperwork." She held up a hand. "Let's start with the basics." She walked the line with me, eyes on the old iron pins, my string, the hickory's shadow, the way the driveway broke ever so slightly between the 2 properties. She checked her tablet, then the county parcel map I'd printed. She walked it again, slower, like a pastor reading familiar verses, but wanting to savor every syllable. Finally, she stopped in front of Karen. "Ma'am, this parcel is not within your HOA's recorded boundaries." Karen's mouth pinched. "Our developer intended intent isn't recorded law," Rachel said. "This lot is its own legal parcel, not subject to Rolling Ridge covenants. It's adjacent, yes. But adjacency doesn't create authority." Karen forced a laugh, soft and cutting. "So you're saying he can do anything he wants? Paint it purple. Run a junkyard. Keep livestock." "I'm saying," Rachel answered, "he is subject to county code like anyone else outside your HOA. Setbacks, noise, trash, pick up regular rules. Not yours." I thought that would be the end. It would have been for most folks. But Karen looked at me with a sugary smile that felt like stepping on a nail. "Then we'll explore our other remedies," she said. "There are easements to consider. Shared curb maintenance. Safety concerns. Easements in my deed," I said. "I respect it. Always have." She stepped close enough that I could smell her perfume sharp, like citrus trying to be mean. "We'll see how much you respect it when we hold our community parade," she whispered. "We always stage across the front lawns. It's tradition." I met her eyes and felt something in me go still. "I respect people," I said, "not bullies." That night at dinner, we ate on the porch because the house still smelled like paint, and my daughter liked to count the lightning bugs. Sarah set out plates and slid into her chair with a tired smile. "I ran into Rachel at the grocery," she said. She said she'd write a letter we can keep on hand. Official as they come. Good, I said, though my shoulders didn't drop. I kept thinking about Karen's threat. Tradition used like a hammer. I didn't care about a parade. I cared about my kids feeling watched in their own yard. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a post from the Rolling Ridge page. We regret to inform the community that the new resident at 403 Maple is refusing to comply and has threatened board members with legal action. Underneath were comments, "Call ICE," one said, which told me more about their hearts than their brains. "We need to take back our street," another wrote. "He'll bring down property values." Comments multiplied. Nasty little rabbits. I went to bed with a knot in my chest and dreamt about fences and storms. Saturday morning, I woke to a thump and found a stack of paper on my porch. A special assessment notice from the HOA. Addressed to occupant, it listed fines for unauthorized exterior, modifications, an illegal flag, non-conforming, vehicle, and something called aesthetic discordance. Total made my eyebrow twitch. They'd slid the packet under my door like a thief slides a threat into a movie. I laughed once, without humor, and carried the packet to the truck. I drove to the county building, flag cuff snaps still imprinted on my palm. The clerk, an old boy with a mustache so earnest it should have been notarized, read the notice and shook his head. "They can't assess you if you're not in their association," he said. "You don't owe them a nickel." "I know," I replied, "but they're hoping I don't." He stamped my copies and handed them back. His stamp an echo of the one on the D-Dink, saying what words couldn't. "If they try again, hey, bring it to the sheriff," he said. Harassment has a shape, and this looks close. On my way home, I stopped at the hardware store. Bought a fresh box of screws and a sign. Private property, no trespassing. When I got back, I sunk the sign into the line I'd strung, clean and square. It didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a fence that says, "You stay on your side. I'll stay on mine," the kind that makes good neighbors. According to poets who've worked fields, that afternoon, Carl came with his thermos, and we watched the parade that wasn't. Karen led a troop of teenagers with streamers down her side of the grass. When they reached my stakes, they veered, looping awkwardly into the street. She looked at my sign the way a fox looks at a trap it can't spring. Then she did something. I didn't expect. She knocked on my door with the camera rolling. "Neighbors," she announced. Voice loud, smile wide. "I'm here to appeal to your better nature." She angled the lens to catch my flag, my truck, my porch swing, my face. "This man is refusing to comply with community norms. He's dividing us." I felt heat climb my neck, but kept my voice steady. "Karen, you came to my house after weeks of postings and notices, and you're filming me on my porch without my consent. That's not neighborly." She giggled like a child. "It's freedom of the press. It's harassment," I said, and gently raised my phone to record too. "But if you want light, let's turn it on." I nodded toward the camera. "My name is Mason Ward. I bought this house fair and square. The county says my property isn't in Rolling Ridge. I wish my neighbors well. I'll mow my lawn, wave at your grandkids, and haul your trash cans when the wind takes them. But I won't be bullied." Karen laughed again, sugary sore. "We'll see what a judge says." "I'd love to show a judge my deed," I said. "I'll bring my father's flag to court and tell him what promise it stands for." She flinched, just a shade, like the word father reached a place she couldn't measure with her ruler. Then she left, phone up, visor straight, smile welded on. By evening, the video was online. Comments flooded both ways, some folks cheering her, others siding with me. I read them until Sarah took my phone and set it face down on the porch table. "Hey," she said soft. "Let's not live inside someone else's storm." I nodded, and we watched the sky turn the color of old denim. I could hear the faint hum of a sheriff's siren somewhere down on Route 6, then not at all. Crickets tuned their chords. The flag made its quiet, steady music. The next morning was Sunday. I put on my cleanest jeans, and we went to church, the same white one my parents had taken me to when I still wore clip-on ties. After service, folks gathered in the fellowship hall around coffee and store-bought donuts. There's nothing like a church foyer for passing information without malice. "We saw the video," Mrs. Patterson said, patting my elbow like a teacher correcting a test with kindness. "You held yourself well." "Trying to," I said. By afternoon, I had a plan I didn't much want, but had known I might need. I called an attorney in town, a quiet man named Ellis, who wore the same corduroy jacket through every season. He didn't like to fight. He liked to end things. I took him my folder and my thorny stack of notices. After he read, he leaned back and steepled his fingers. "We'll send a ceases for harassment and tortious interference," he said. "We'll request a declaratory judgment on the boundary to stop this silliness. And we'll ask for injunctive relief so they have to leave you alone while it shakes out." "I don't want to burn bridges," I said. "Just stop the poking. Then we'll write like carpenters," he answered. "Measure twice, cut once, and don't split the grain." 3 days later, as the sun went down, copper over the hickory, certified letter landed in the hands of every Rolling Ridge board member. And at 7 o'clock the next morning, a notice went up on their Facebook page. "Emergency meeting, possible litigation." I sipped coffee, watched the first school bus of fall groan down the street, and thought of my father's hand scarred, patient, strong. A line is an agreement. Sometimes, for the line to hold, you have to remind folks where it is. And sometimes, you have to invite the whole town to watch. The Rolling Ridge Clubhouse sits behind their iron gate like a modest courthouse split-face block. Double doors, a flagpole of their own that's always 2 inches shorter than it should be. The night of their emergency meeting, the parking lot filled early. People arrived in golf carts and sensible sedans. I parked out on the public street with Carl and Rachel from planning, who came because her office had been named in the agenda. Ellis walked up last, a slim folder under his arm. The way a man carries a book he's read twice. We weren't there to make a scene. We were there to be seen inside. The chairs had been set in tight rows, facing a folding table where Karen and her board sat like they'd been poured there. A microphone squeaked. A sign-in sheet waited like a trap. I signed anyway. "Non-member," I wrote under my name. "Citizen." Karen called the meeting to order with her signature smile. She read a statement about community cohesion and shared standards in protecting property values. By the time she got to me, the air felt like a drum stretched too tight. "We have a resident," she began. "Non-member," Ellis said, just loud enough, not unkind. "Man living within our neighborhood," she corrected, eyes flicking to the side, "who refuses to comply with our bylaws. He has raised an oversized flag, installed unapproved fixtures, and made threats to sue our volunteers." Murmurs rolled like a low tide through the room. Ellis stood. He laid 2 copies of a judge-stamped document on the table, and one by the microphone. "My client is not within your association," he said, voice even as Sunday. "He is within the county. A declaratory order from Judge Halverson confirms the parcel boundary beyond dispute. Furthermore, this injunction granted yesterday prohibits further attempts to enforce your rules against him or to harass him at his home. Any violation will be considered contempt of court." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. A throat cleared. Someone in the back whispered what sounded like "about time." Karen's smile twitched, then snapped back in place like elastic. "We believe the judge will reconsider on appeal." Ellis nodded like a man humoring a child promising to run away with a cardboard suitcase. "You're welcome to file. Meanwhile, the order stands." Rachel raised her hand like she was in civics class. "For those interested, the county plat maps are public. The office is open weekdays. I'm happy to show anyone how to read a parcel line. We've had, frankly, a lot of confusion." A man too rose up, lifted his arm. I recognized Himone's, the brick place on the corner, flag always at half-mast for reasons unknown. "Why are we spending our dues on this?" he asked, it seems. Dumb. Laughter, nervous at first, then warm, as if people had been holding it in for years and were relieved to hear it out loud. Another woman spoke. "I got a violation last month because my wind chimes were metallic. Who decides these things?" Heads turned to Karen. The board fidgeted. Power looks heavy when it starts to slide. Karen tried to steer the car back onto the road. This is about standards, she insisted. Without standards, neighborhoods slip. People stop caring. Grass grows tall. I thought of my father kneeling in a ditch, pulling weeds by the handful because it was his ditch. And he didn't need a letter to tell him to love what was his. I stood, hands in my pockets, and spoke into the microphone without raising my voice. Standards aren't the problem, I said. Control is. I take care of my place because it's a piece of my family. My father fell off a telephone pole in '83 and still limped out to mow his lawn every Saturday. He taught me that pride isn't something you mail. It's something you do when no one's watching. I paused, hearing the flag outside snap once in the wind. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking to be left alone on my side of the line. I'll wave to you. I'll snowblow the curb after a storm if your back is bad. I'll show your grandkid how to bait a hook if he asks. But I won't be told what color my porch swing has to be by people who don't own my deed. Silence held steady. Then broke in, soft claps that grew hand to hand. Until even a couple of board members looked uncomfortable not joining, Karen struck the table with her penny gavel. Out of order, she said, tight. This meeting is for members. Then adjourn. The man with the forever half-mast flag called. We've heard enough. Outside, fall had sharpened its teeth. You could smell wood smoke from somewhere beyond the gates. People lingered in the parking lot, small circles forming, voices lower than before, softer. A woman introduced herself as Nancy, smiled like she meant it. I'm sorry about the Facebook mess, she said. That wasn't who we want to be. Appreciate that, I said. The next week changed in small ways that felt like rain after a hot summer. The compliance officer no longer patrolled my flower bed. The special assessment notices stopped. The Facebook comments cooled from lava to stone. A few folks began to wave as they drove past. Carl started telling a joke again that he hadn't told in months because it needed laughter to land. I installed the porch swing the way I intended, level and strong. And Sarah and I learned the rhythm of it together after the kids went to bed. On Saturday, I found a casserole on our porch with a note. Welcome to the neighborhood, even if technically you're not in it. Linda. I laughed, and it sounded like something heavy snapping loose. On Sunday afternoon, I saw Karen in her front yard, visor shadowing her eyes, hose in hand. She watched as my son and daughter chalked hopscotch on our driveway, the squares bright like little hopes. I could have stared at the ground. I could have turned away. Instead, I walked to the boundary line and stood still until she looked up. Afternoon, I said. She tightened the hose nozzle. Afternoon. I nodded at the flowers along her curb mums, too perfect to be real. They look good, she shrugged. I like things tidy. Me too, I said. Just not the same kind of tidy. She smirked. And for a heartbeat, the visor slipped and I saw something human, maybe tired. Maybe lonely. Maybe an old fight she'd been losing long before she came after my mailbox. I don't know what to say to you, she admitted. So quiet I almost missed it under the hose hiss. Try hello, I said. It's a decent start. She didn't say it. Not that day. But she didn't file another complaint either. 2 weeks later, the board posted a new policy. All complaints must be signed. No anonymous reports. Fines require photo evidence and 2 board member approvals. The wind chime rule disappeared. The metallic language died in the minutes with a little asterisk. A small thing. A real thing. I raised my father's flag high on the morning the first frost clung to the hickory leaves like sugar. The kids' breath fogged as they laughed. Sarah tucked her hands into my jacket pockets and leaned into my shoulder. Across the way, Nancy waved from her mailbox. And the man with the half-mast flag had moved it to the top. Where it belonged, I ran my hand down the flagpole. Feeling every nick and notch my father's hands had left, I thought about lines in paper, in dirt, in a man's heart. I thought about how you hold them without turning hard. How you stand up without making your whole life a fight. Quiet justice, not arrogance. Dignity you can hear in the simple way a hinge swings. When it's oiled and doing its job, here's the truth I learned in the weeks since. I bought the little white house next to the big gate. Sometimes standing up for what's right means drawing a line and then offering a chair just inside of it. You don't invite someone to trample you, but you don't lock your heart either. You wave. You shovel a driveway. You teach a kid to tie a fishing knot. You live like your father's watching from the porch, smiling in the way a man smiles, and his son finally gets it. The lake down the road was calm the evening the last of the leaves fell. I took a walk there alone, boots crunching the brittle gold. Water held the sky like a promise. The town was quiet in that way. Small towns are when they've argued and eaten and gone home. A sheriff car rolled past without siren or hurry. Somewhere, a radio played an old song, its chorus drifting like smoke. I felt proud, not the kind that puffs up and needs applause, but the kind that sits heavy and warm and says, "You did right by your people." I thought of my mother's hands, ironing church dresses next to the swamp cooler, and my father's hands building a flagpole that would outlast both of us. I thought of my kids, who would grow up knowing that a deed is more than paper and a neighbor is more than a rule book. Have you ever faced an HOA? It's like this one that forgot the difference between standards and control? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. Maybe you drew a line. Maybe you're still looking for the stakes. Either way, you're not alone. And if you believe some fights are worth having the quiet, steady kind that protect what matters, hit subscribe. We'll stand up together.